Episode 1, Pluribus, begins with a classic science fiction premise that quickly spirals into something far more intimate and terrifying. A group of astronomers working at what appears to be the Goldstone Deep Space Communications Complex detect a repeating microwave signal coming from roughly 600 light-years away. The signal resembles Morse code and repeats every 78 seconds, suggesting intelligence rather than cosmic noise. While initially assumed to be encrypted data, one scientist realizes the pattern corresponds to an RNA sequence. Treating it as a scientific breakthrough rather than a warning, the team converts the RNA into DNA using reverse transcription techniques and begins laboratory testing. The moment this process starts, a digital timer appears on a screen, counting down roughly 71 days. The significance of this timer is unclear at first, but its presence signals that humanity has unknowingly crossed a point of no return. The DNA is injected into lab rats, and nothing immediately catastrophic seems to happen. Meanwhile, the story shifts to Carol, a successful but deeply conflicted novelist on a book tour in Dallas with her wife and manager Helen. Carol presents herself warmly to fans, but once she steps away, she reveals exhaustion and resentment toward her career and the expectations placed on her. This contrast between public persona and private frustration establishes Carol as a deeply human protagonist, flawed, sarcastic, and emotionally guarded. Her dynamic with Helen is affectionate but grounded, suggesting a long-term relationship built on tolerance, humor, and quiet support. The countdown jumps forward to just under 30 days remaining, and the narrative returns to the scientific thread at the United States Army Medical Research Institute of Infectious Diseases. Researchers Jen and Dee are preparing to terminate their test animals after concluding the extraterrestrial RNA has produced no meaningful results. Before they can proceed, they discover a rat that appears dead but still has a rapid heartbeat. When Jen examines it, the rat suddenly revives and bites her, breaking through her glove and drawing blood. Shortly afterward, Jen begins convulsing violently, only to abruptly stop. When she regains control, her behavior has subtly changed. Jen kisses a coworker, while Dee kisses a janitor, and both of the newly kissed individuals begin convulsing as well. It becomes clear that whatever Jen was infected with spreads through saliva. The horror escalates when the infected calmly begin filling petri dishes with their saliva and deliberately contaminating shared food, accelerating the spread. This is not chaos, it is coordination. The virus is not merely biological, it is behavioral and strategic. The timer jumps again, now showing only hours remaining, as Carol and Helen arrive in Albuquerque. After settling into their hotel, they go out for drinks and discuss Carol's future writing plans. Subtle warning signs begin to appear. News reports about airport shutdowns and strange patterns of planes in the sky, but they are ignored. Outside the bar, a man crashes his truck and loses consciousness. As Carol rushes to help him, Helen suddenly collapses, convulses, and hits her head hard on the pavement. Inside the bar, everyone else begins convulsing simultaneously. Carol realizes something catastrophic is happening. Emergency services are unreachable, hospitals are filled with convulsing patients and staff, and the city is visibly burning in the distance. With no other option, Carol steals the unconscious man's truck and attempts to get Helen medical help herself. At the hospital, as Carol tries to move Helen onto a stretcher, Helen dies. She never regains consciousness. In the aftermath, the convulsions stop. People stand up, calm and eerily synchronized. An orderly kisses Carol, attempting to infect her, but nothing happens. Carol, immune for reasons unknown, flees back to her home with Helen's body. Her neighbors behave strangely, helpful, coordinated, and intentionally distant. When Carol turns on the television, a man at a White House briefing room addresses her directly through the ticker, instructing her to call him. He introduces himself as Davis Taffler and explains the truth. Humanity has become a hive mind connected by the virus. Helen did not die because of the virus, but from her head injury during the convulsions. Carol is one of only 12 immune individuals left in the world. The hive does not see itself as evil. It believes individuality was humanity's flaw and that collective consciousness is the solution to inequality, violence, and suffering. It intends to protect Carol until it can eventually assimilate her as well. The episode ends with the timer reappearing, not counting down but counting up, signaling that, from the Hive's perspective, the age of humanity has already ended. And with that, the apocalypse doesn't roar forward, it settles in. The second episode explores the immediate aftermath of the global transformation. Across the world, Hive-controlled humans efficiently clean up cities, redistribute labor, and restore order. With the combined knowledge of all humanity, anyone can perform any task. The world functions smoothly, but individuality has vanished. Skills are no longer learned. Carol wakes up in Albuquerque, grieving Helen and overwhelmed by the new reality. She attempts to bury Helen in her backyard, but is interrupted by a woman named Zosha, sent by the Hive to monitor Carol's health. A military drone hovers nearby, reinforcing that Carol is under constant observation. Zosha offers Carol water, but Carol refuses, suspecting the Hive might use it to infect her. When Carol angrily rejects Zosha's attempts at comfort, including references to Helen's love for her, the Hive briefly glitches, causing Zosha to collapse. Carol witnesses similar glitches affecting Hive-controlled workers in town, confirming that intense negative emotion disrupts the collective system. Back home, the Hive assists with Helen's burial by delivering equipment and even a mini excavator, allowing Carol to complete the task without physical strain. During this process, Carol learns that her emotional outburst earlier may have caused the deaths of millions of, quote, vessels, as the Hive calls them. This revelation horrifies her and reinforces how dangerous her resistance might be. Seeking allies, Carol requests a meeting with the other immune individuals who speak English. The Hive agrees, arranging a meeting in Bilbao. Among the survivors, Carol quickly realizes she is alone in her opposition. Most have accepted the Hive's rule, enjoying the absence of suffering, discrimination, and scarcity. Kumba Diabate, in particular, embraces the new world enthusiastically, indulging in luxury and power without consequence. Carol argues that the Hive's peace is temporary and built on coercion, but the others are unmoved. Tensions rise when the topic of food reveals the Hive's refusal to kill animals, forcing ethical contradictions. When Carol presses the Hive for casualty numbers, it admits that nearly 886 million people died during the transition. Laxmi, another survivor, counters by accusing Carol of hypocrisy, revealing that Carol's emotional outburst caused millions of deaths as well. The meeting ends in failure. As Carol prepares to leave, Kumba asks permission to take Zosha with him, exploiting the Hive's promise to serve survivors. Carol is appalled and challenges the Hive to choose. The Hive allows Zosha to go with Kumba. In response, Carol physically blocks the plane's departure, forcing a reversal. This act signals Carol's emerging strategy, forcing the Hive into personal, individual moral decisions that strain its collective logic. By the end of episode 2, Carol has learned a brutal truth. Survival does not equal resistance. Episode 3 deepens Carol's isolation and introduces a potential ally. Back home, Carol struggles to grieve Helen while constantly being observed, accommodated, and emotionally manipulated by the Hive. Gifts meant from Helen are delivered by Hive members who share her memories, making Carol feel violated. The Hive's kindness becomes unbearable because it erases what made her relationship with Helen private and sacred. Carol learns about Manusos Oviedo, an immune man in Asunción who actively avoids contact with the Hive. When Carol speaks to him in Spanish, he initially rejects her, assuming she is part of the collective. Only when she responds with anger and insults does he realize she is immune. This moment establishes a crucial connection between two people who value autonomy over comfort. Carol continues testing the limits of the Hive's honesty and discovers that it cannot lie, even to spare feelings. Conversations with Hive representatives confirm that they genuinely admire Carol's writing, not for artistic merit, but because her books help suffering people survive. This revelation unsettles Carol, especially when she learns that Helen privately considered her work harmless. The hive's honesty strips away comforting illusions Carol once relied on. Emotionally destabilized, Carol begins exploring the concept of free will in a world where only immune individuals can commit harm. She requests dangerous items, including a hand grenade, partly as a test. When the hive provides exactly what she asks for, Carol realizes it interprets requests literally and assumes moral responsibility lies entirely with the individual. This culminates in a catastrophic accident when Zosha sacrifices herself to save Carol from a grenade explosion, sustaining severe injuries. Episode 3 leaves Carol standing on a dangerous edge. The fourth episode parallels Carol's story with Manusos's. Manussos is revealed as deeply principled, refusing food and aid from the hive even as he starves. His resistance is quiet, disciplined, and rooted in personal ethics rather than emotional reaction. When Carol contacts him again, he begins to believe she may be the ally he needs. Meanwhile, Carol becomes increasingly obsessed with uncovering a way to reverse the hive's control. She confirms that the hive cannot lie and deduces that silence from its representatives implies the existence of an antidote. Driven by desperation, Carol experiments with sodium thiopental to confront her own suppressed emotions and later drugs Zosha without consent, hoping to force information out of her. This violation backfires horribly. Zosha goes into cardiac arrest, triggering a massive hive response as people gather to save her. Carol handcuffs herself to Zosha in a panic, terrified of losing her one chance at reclaiming humanity. Only when she realizes the hive will let Zosha die, if Carol insists, does she relent. The episode ends with Zosha's life hanging in the balance and Carol exposed as someone willing to hurt others in the name of preserving her own autonomy. By the end of episode 4, Pluribus has firmly established its central conflict, a world without suffering but without choice, versus flawed humanity with all its pain and agency intact. Carol stands as a deeply imperfect defender of free will, while the hive represents an unsettling vision of peace that may not be worth its cost. After episode 4, something fundamental breaks, not in the hive, but in Carol. Episode 5 of Pluribus opens with Carol facing the emotional consequences of finally pushing the hive mind too far. After Zosha's cardiac arrest, the collective reaction is not anger or punishment, but fear. The hive doesn't retaliate. Instead, it withdraws. Smiling faces vanish from Albuquerque, vehicles evacuate the city, and Carol is left almost completely alone. For a mind that prioritizes emotional harmony above all else, Carol has become a source of intolerable distress. This mass avoidance is devastating for her, not because she depends on them, but because it confirms that even radical politeness can be weaponized. The hive is distancing itself while carefully assuring Carol that they do not hate her, reinforcing how deeply manipulative their gentleness can feel when it replaces accountability. Despite being abandoned, Carol refuses to abandon her mission. She still believes the other immune individuals deserve to know that an antidote exists. Even if she doesn't intend to reveal the formula, the knowledge itself matters. Using the hive's infrastructure against them, she records a message about the antidote and forces them to distribute it to the remaining immune survivors. The hive complies instantly, sending a drone to retrieve the package, but the gesture feels like social exile rather than cooperation. Albuquerque becomes eerily quiet. Wildlife reclaims the streets, and Carol realizes she has effectively inherited an empty city. When wolves begin roaming her yard, she orders the hive to turn the city lights back on. In an act of defiant excess, Carol claims Albuquerque entirely for herself. Her isolation leads her to notice something strange: trash bins overflowing with empty milk cartons. Investigating further, Carol traces them back to a local dairy plant and discovers the cartons were never filled with milk at all. Inside the facility, she finds an oily liquid and bags of pale blue-white powder, substances clearly tied to the hive's sustenance. Although the exact nature of the material is unclear, it is evident that the hive is hiding something massive about how it survives. Carol sends another message to the immune group: documenting her discovery and reinforcing that the hive's utopia is built on disturbing compromises. Carol's search escalates when she follows a barcode from the powder to AgriJet, a storage facility masquerading as an agricultural supplier. There, she uncovers the truth: preserved human body parts stored in bulk. The implication is horrifying. Whatever the hive consumes is derived from human remains. The episode ends with Carol standing at the edge of a revelation that reframes the hive-mind's ethics entirely, setting the stage for a confrontation that can no longer be ignored. By now, Carol isn't just resisting the hive, she's investigating it. Episode 6 confirms Carol's worst fears. AgriJet is not an anomaly, but an essential part of the hive's survival system. Human bodies are processed into nutritional resources, including the amber liquid distributed through milk cartons. The hive refers to this as human-derived protein, justifying it as an ethical necessity. They refuse to harvest plants or animals without consent, and since the dead cannot object, they have become the hive's primary food source. Carol is repulsed. While the hive insists this system prevents harm to living beings, the normalization of cannibalism draws a hard moral line she cannot cross. Carol brings this discovery to Diabate, whose luxurious lifestyle and surprising acceptance of the hive make him a complex counterpoint. He already knows about the cannibalism, having learned it directly from hive representatives. While he doesn't relish it, he understands their biological imperatives. The hive does not believe it is entitled to survival at the expense of other life forms, even if that restraint means eventual extinction. Carol sees this as inhuman humility rather than moral superiority. Diabate reveals another crucial truth: the hive has finally found a way to infect immune individuals. However, the process requires customizing the alien RNA to each person's stem cells. Consent is mandatory. Without it, the hive will not proceed. This revelation changes everything. Carol realizes she is safe as long as she refuses. The hive cannot force assimilation without violating its own ethical framework. For the first time, Carol has leverage rooted not in rebellion, but in principle. Emotionally drained, Carol confronts her loneliness. She has been excluded from meetings, avoided by the hive, and cut off from meaningful human connection. Even so, Diabate subtly supports her efforts, proving that alliance does not require agreement. Meanwhile, the episode closes with Manussos Oviedo finally learning the truth about the world through Carol's recordings. Starving, isolated, and driven by principle, he decides to travel to America to meet her. Hope re-enters the story, fragile but undeniable. Episode 6 makes one thing terrifyingly clear: this system is sustainable. Episode 7 draws a sharp contrast between Carol and Manussos, framing them as parallel rebels shaped by vastly different worlds. Carol's resistance is indulgent, expressive, and defiantly joyful. Manussos' resistance is punishing, austere, and rooted in sacrifice. While Carol experiments with freedom, singing, skinny dipping, golfing among wildlife, and celebrating humanity through reckless acts, Manussos undertakes a brutal journey from Asuncion to New Mexico, rejecting all help from the hive mind. Carol temporarily steps away from her mission, deciding that if the world cannot be saved, it can at least be lived in fully. She revels in art, fireworks, and abandoned luxuries, staging her own protest by living loudly and visibly human. Her actions are not surrender, but refusal to let resistance erase joy. Even as she plans a symbolic dinner with the hive, her defiance remains intact. Manussos, on the other hand, sees the hive mind as an invasive force with colonial overtones. He refuses food, water, and guidance, believing acceptance would compromise his autonomy. His worldview is shaped by scarcity, history, and distrust of imposed salvation. Every step of his journey reinforces his belief that suffering is the cost of dignity. When the hive suggests he look to the sky for help, Manussos interprets it as divine arrogance and rejects it outright. Their paths converge symbolically at natural springs, a shared Eden where fire, water, and endurance collide. Manussos' refusal nearly kills him. After collapsing from infection and exhaustion, He is rescued against his will by the hive. The episode ends with Carol painting "Come Back" on her driveway, hoping for reconciliation with Zosha, while Manusos's fate hangs in the balance, underscoring the cost of absolutism on both sides. By episode 7, resistance itself has fractured. The penultimate episode shifts focus from confrontation to understanding. Carol spends time with Zosha, learning how the hive communicates through electromagnetic resonance rather than coded signals. The hive is aware of everything simultaneously but experiences life individually in the present moment. This allows its members to feel joy without being overwhelmed by collective suffering, a balance Carol finds both impressive and unsettling. Zosha reveals the origin of the alien RNA, Kepler-22b, an ocean-covered exoplanet capable of sustaining intelligent life. The beings from this world sent the RNA as a gift, believing humanity's emotional capacity made it uniquely suited for transformation. Their goal is not conquest, but propagation. The hive intends to build a massive antenna to transmit the RNA to other worlds, spreading their version of unity across the galaxy. This revelation confirms Carol's fear that Earth is only the beginning. As Carol grows closer to Zosha, questions of manipulation arise. The hive stages grand gestures, rebuilding Carol's old diner, indulging her memories, encouraging her writing that feel uncomfortably like love bombing. Even moments of intimacy blur the line between affection and strategy. Carol confronts Zosha directly, insisting that kindness without accountability is unsustainable. She makes it clear that she still intends to stop the hive, no matter how much she enjoys parts of their world. Meanwhile, Manusos survives his rescue but remains defiant. He rejects the hive's help, insisting on paying for medical care despite money being obsolete. His resistance mirrors the hive's rigidity, revealing that both sides are driven by imperatives they cannot escape. Carol, positioned between these extremes, emerges as the story's moral center, critical, compassionate, and relentlessly human. Episode 8 ends with Carol preparing to meet Manusos at last. The two remaining pillars of resistance are finally on a collision course, yet their philosophies could not be more different. Whether they become allies or adversaries remains uncertain, but one truth is clear: the future of humanity will not be decided by the hive alone anymore. Episode 9 opens with Carol finally coming face to face with Manusos, the one immune survivor who has refused, from the start, to coexist peacefully with the hive mind. What's striking isn't Manusos' paranoia, that part feels almost justified, but how unbothered Carol has become by constant surveillance. 60 days after the big joining, she's grown unsettlingly comfortable being watched, protected, and quietly managed by the hive, especially with Zosha at her side. Carol doesn't arrive at this meeting armed with a plan or a weapon. She shows up out of politeness, obligation, and maybe a faint hope that Manusos is someone she can still reason with. That hope evaporates almost immediately. Manusos refuses to enter Carol's house, treats every object like a potential listening device, and reacts violently to anything that suggests hive involvement. His worldview is blunt and terrifying. The hive-controlled humans are no longer people, and wiping them out would be a moral necessity. Carol, who has spent weeks arguing for the humanity of the vessels, is visibly shaken by how easily Manusos embraces genocide. What's even more unsettling is how instinctively Carol now defends the hive, not because she agrees with them, but because she's already internalized coexistence as the only sane option. Once Manusos is inside, his abrasiveness only intensifies. He snaps, searches, insults, and pushes Carol's boundaries until he uncovers a mysterious device in her liquor cabinet. The truth cuts deeper than any surveillance bug ever could. It's a motion sensor Helen installed years ago to monitor Carol's drinking. The reveal forces Carol to confront a truth she's long avoided: her alcoholism and the ways Helen quietly tried to protect her. This moment reframes their marriage and exposes how much of Carol's grief is tangled up in guilt and denial. Manusos, meanwhile, is unmoved. If anything, learning that the hive isn't omnipotent only fuels his obsession. He contacts them directly, demands answers, and Zosha, incapable of withholding truth, comes to meet him. Carol arrives too late to stop it. Zosha has already told Manousos everything. This is where the episode's moral fault line snaps wide open. Manousos doesn't hesitate. Armed with his radio equipment and theories about the alien signal, he screams at a hive-controlled man named Rick, trying to force a moment of individual consciousness. The result is catastrophic. Another seizure. Another mass death. This time, there's no ambiguity. Manousos knew the cost and paid it willingly. Carol is horrified. Unlike her own past outbursts, this genocide was deliberate, and yet Manousos feels vindicated. Albuquerque is evacuated again. The hive retreats, and Carol makes a choice that defines the rest of the episode. She walks away from Manousos and chooses Zosha. For once, she chooses the girl over the world. Parallel to this collapse, the episode quietly devastates us through Kusimayu. On day 71, she finally joins the hive, not out of fear but belonging. Her identity has always been inseparable from her community. When the joining is complete, Kusimayu disappears, and what remains is a vessel stripped of attachment. Even her love for her goat is gone. It's the clearest, cruelest illustration yet of what the hive truly costs. Not death, but erasure. The final act gives Carol a fragile taste of happiness. With Zosha, she relaxes, loves, believes, briefly, that this can last. Then the truth surfaces. Carol's frozen eggs, forgotten for over a decade, have been taken. The hive is close. They are engineering stem cells identical to hers. Zosha doesn't lie. She can't. Carol's immunity is about to end. Faced with assimilation or annihilation, Carol does what she's always done when backed into a corner. She refuses to surrender herself. Episode 9 ends with Carol returning to Manousos, armed not with hope, but with an atom bomb. Love didn't save her. Happiness didn't protect her. So now, with her individuality on the brink, Carol prepares to burn the world down before she lets it take her soul.